TverskyWellness.com.
Welcome to a special edition of the Tuesday Tversky Wellness Institute's discussion group. Every week is special, but this week is particularly special because today is the first of two sessions that are being guest presented by my good friend, my colleague, my teacher, Brett Chitty. Many of you are familiar with Brett because he's presented for us in the past, and many of you are a part of his ongoing PTI program, which stands for Pathway to Insight, which is an excellent program. I'm a part of that, and I encourage anyone who wants to go deeper or hear or really is interested in what Brett is sharing here today. You can follow up by checking out his website, pathwaytoinsight.com. The setup for today is Brett is going to do a presentation for us. And at some point, Brett's going to open it up for questions or for comments. And of course, if you're on the phone this week, you're going to have to listen extra carefully because a lot of the things that Brett is going to be doing are written on a board. There might be some diagrams or things like that you might miss out this week if you're not able to actually view the screen. I'm really excited to hear what Brett has to say. I'm just really keen and interested, and it's also fun for me to be able to just sit back and relax and just watch the call. So, Brett, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Fig. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My friendship with Fig goes back many years, and I treasure every moment of it. So thank you, Fig, for having me on. And normally what tends to happen is that Fig might invite people, but on this occasion I kind of invited myself to Fig's call, and Fig was very agreeable to it. So thank you for having me. Okay. So another reason why I wanted to do these two sessions is because I wanted an opportunity to talk about the three principles more purely. I mean, I'm very grateful for what I've learned over the 11, 12 years of learning about the three principles, but I kind of break it down into three parts, right? The first part was for 4 years where I was just trying to take in the principles from everybody, from every source, from every book, and try and put them all together in my own way. Right? And then I had a meeting with, a one-on-one meeting with Keith and Fowler, and Keith is with us today, so welcome, Keith. And he says 5 words to me that just did something for me. He said, this is a single paradigm. Okay, so in that moment, something happened. He didn't talk about mind, thought, or consciousness at all. He just said, this is a single paradigm. So, and it took me a little while to get familiar with what I was seeing. Right? And then after I was like, oh, so this is the principle, this is feeling coming from thought, right? But I've always tried to stay within the framework of feeling and coming from thought in a moment. It's very, very helpful. But today I want to go more into the principles without really adding form to it. Okay, can we look in the direction of mind, thought, and consciousness without really saying too much about the form? Right? Okay, so that's my main motivation for doing this presentation. As a precaution, though, I would like to set the stage for, you might call it listening, but it depends. Right? So first of all, if I explain what a wheel is, and I explain gears, and I explain the chain, and I explain the handlebars, and I explain the brake, right? You can start to see I'm not really talking about those. I'm talking about a bicycle. But I can't really talk about the bicycle. All I can do is talk about those little parts, hoping that you will find something that brings it all together in your own way. So what I'm sharing won't be the principle in and of themselves. That's something for you to discover for yourself. And secondly, the word I will be saying will be in English, right? But the message will not be in English. Okay. The word I'm going to say is in English, but the message will not be in English. The message is before language. Before city bank, don't listen to the words. Okay? Because if you try and listen through language, you're creating a lens called language. Right? And that's all you can see. What we want really is a lens-less way of seeing. I can't describe that for you, but that's a genuine possibility. Each and every one of us have got that. So if you keep that in mind, or not so much as a thought and carry it with you, then hopefully we'll hear something. Okay, cool. So, mind on consciousness. It's always something I've struggled with, and I've never known how to put it all together. But recently, it's got more, much more palpable, more. I get a sense of it. I get a real feeling for it. So I've come up on the board behind me. I've written what I think are something that's simple and offers a way to put it all together. Okay. So I've got in here mind. And when I talk about mind, I'm talking about the principle or the nature of mind or divine mind or universal mind. I'm talking about that kind of mind, not our mind or your mind. Okay. The mind, the energy of all things, whether in formless or form. That's the quote from Citibank. Everything I put on here comes from Citibank. Thought, he said, there is a mystical bridge that connects the formless and form. Thought is that bridge. Okay, that's really key here. So when you have a mystical bridge, that's why thought is saying that's the missing link. Okay. And consciousness, to have an emotion or feeling, one must have thought to create the feeling, plus consciousness to be aware of it. Okay, so far, can you see there? Can you see how we can put all things together to make one? I'm not going to tell you what that is, but can you find that space within you, that dimension within you that's not in form, but from the formless? And what will get you there is recognizing that the mystical bridge is this called thought. Okay. There is nothing else but these three principles, literally. Okay. So what I want to do is talk a little bit more now, not about formless and form and how it relates to all of this. So with mind, another way of saying perhaps the energy of all things, whether in form and formless, might be the energy of all things, whether before time, space and matter and in time, space and matter. The energy of all things, whether spiritual or physical. The energy of all things, whether real or an illusion. The energy of all things, whether the thing we've yet to discover and the thing we have discovered. The energy of, well, everything. Everything about the human experience. Every feeling, every experience, every circumstance, every situation, every event, every behavior, all of it. Is all contained within the system called the three principles. Okay. The good news of having thought being brought to our attention to see that it is the mystical bridge between the form and formless is that you now have the opportunity to experience more directly and deeply what the formless has to offer you. What is the formless? I'll leave that to you. I've heard different names for it, like wisdom, God, infinity, infinite knowledge, the source within. There's probably more in your own language, but it's all there. Okay. Secondly, by recognizing that thought is the mystical bridge, it ruled out that the form you're in is being connected to something other than the formless. What? So suddenly we are in a different order of how we function as human beings. Thirdly, by describing thought as the mystical bridge, we can see the, I'm going to use my hand for it, they're formless and form, and we have thought in between that link the two together. Right? So now we can see that the principle of thought is what gives you the form. It creates a feeling, right? But the real source of it comes from the formless. So now we can say something from the formless, putting something into the principle of thought to create the feeling. And you have consciousness, and suddenly you're in it. So no matter what we're going through, that's how it works. It rules out what doesn't work. Paradigmatically speaking, if you know thought creates the feeling, then the feeling is not coming from anything else. That's a simple version. But the way I look at it paradigmatically now is that when you see that the feeling is coming from thought, because we have that bridge, the formless must be part of the picture. And that's key. Because when you see thought, there's a you dimension that comes in and gives you something different, something new, something fresh, something of genuine quality, a human virtue, like confidence, mental health, love, compassion, understanding, all of it already built in within mind. So that's my initial introduction to mind, thought, and consciousness. I didn't want to use some of the more complicated, well, it's not complicated, but the more complex statement that Citibank could come up with. I just wanted to come up with these quotes just to give you something to put together as a starting point. Okay, because once you start seeing it, then you can go deeper into mind or wisdom. And then when you read the more quotes from Citibank, it's like, now I know what you're talking about. Now I know what you're talking about. And like I say, it's not in English. It's not in the word. It's very tempting to be in the word, but it's not in the words. Okay. But, so before I go any further, any quick questions about this?
So because this is quite foundational to the what we're about, what the rest of Brett's remarks are going to be, if anyone has any particular questions about the ideas that what Brett just shared, you can unmute yourself. On the phone, you press *6. And if you're on the computer, just click on your microphone. Basia.
Brett, real quick, all of what you've talked about so far is form, except for the experience we have. In other words, the principles are also in the formless. Is that correct?
Everything I have said is presented to you in the form, correct? The principles themselves are in the formless.
Right. Thank you.
the principle is not something you can see or to hear, that kind of thing, because it's formless. Right? For me today, it's not so much what I know about mind or thought or consciousness. I'm basically being reduced to knowing that it exists. That's enough. If you know it's there, you don't need to know anything about the principles or to work out the principles or to analyze the principles. It's none of that. Just very briefly, that's why you won't be able to understand the principle from the word of another person or even your own thinking. It has to happen through your own insight. And that's the said, right? Thought is the bridge, right? So we have the formless, right? Putting something into thought, the bridge into form. That insight. So the source of your insight is from the formless, or the soul, or from your consciousness, whatever you want to call that. Right? So we now know what an insight is. An insight is something that started from the formless and not from the form. That's what I like to say. Wisdom begins from nothing, and the intellect begins from something.
Devora, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. So a question just popped up in my head. So where would you place subconscious thoughts? Like we're on the bridge. Is that even on the bridge? Is it formless? Is it form?
Okay.
Like kind of like thoughts that are like niggling at my consciousness, but I'm not sure, like, you know, basically subconscious thought.
Okay. What does subconscious thought mean to you?
It's I would say it's like where that I know that something is there, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
Okay, so if you have
So
a subconscious,
it is a thought in some form.
oh well, here's the thing. Do you think you've just answered your own question?
Yeah, yeah. Now that I'm talking about, I do see it. The fact that I know that it's something, it's already a thought, but I can't call it like form because it's in between formless and form.
Okay, I'm not making any distinction between conscious or subconscious or unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about a principle that accounts for the entirety of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for me, I don't think about subconscious thought at all. Right? I mean, I'm either aware of my thoughts or I'm not. But that's not really the point. I mean, if I know I'm having a thought, then that means something had to be visible in the form for me to see it, for me to express it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when I talk about principle of thought, I'm not really talking about conscious thought or unconscious thought. I'm talking about something before conscious thought or unconscious thought.
Oh, wow.
Could you define form? I'm not sure of the distinguishing between the formless and the form.
You're not the first one to say that. So the next part of this presentation, I want to talk more about the formless and the form in the form of a diagram, but I want to have questions first before I go into that section. Okay, so if you hang out with me for a bit longer, and then we can talk about form a bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shall we move on, Steve? I've got the thumbs up from them. Okay. Remember, all the words I said in form, everything I put on the whiteboard is also in form. Okay, so it's not the formula. I am presenting this class to you in form, hoping that you will find that moment, a split second of hearing something for yourself. That did not come from the board. That did not come from what I say. Okay, so don't take what I'm going to put on the board as that's the truth. It's not. Okay. Okay, here we go. We have a bubble called formless, whatever that is. Okay, one of the words I like to use instead is wisdom, or something before time, space, and matter. It is the invisible not yet transformed into the visible. Okay, but it's got to be pretty much a mystery all the time. Which is why I say, I know it is this. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means, but I know it's this. And that's one of the greatest blessings I could have in my life. Okay. So, we also have the form. So, what form? Okay. So, I'm going to be drawing lots of little bubbles to indicate what those forms are. Okay. Faye, you may need to give me a hand in conveying the message to the phone callers.
For those on the phone, what Brett is drawing. So we're starting out with a large bubble, and inside that bubble, it says the word formless. And now Brett is progressively drawing smaller bubbles around that larger bubble with different words in them. One says feeling. Another one says circumstances. Another one says reality. Another one says experience. There's a fifth one emerging now. It says events. These are just popping out of nowhere, folks. There's a sixth little bubble coming out of the formless. It has a question mark.
They pretty much everything. Anything we go through as human beings. Okay? Now, actually, there's a couple more things I want to add here, but I have to put it here instead. Can you see it? Yes, okay.
The seventh bubble, small bubble, says training. And I believe this is the final bubble, and it says inside of it, relationships. So again, you've got one large bubble, inside it says formless, and then around it you have 8 bubbles. One says training, relationships, events, feelings, experience, reality, circumstances, and question mark.
Oh, okay. So if you remember the definitions they said about thought is the mystical bridge that link the form and form together. Okay, so what I will do now is that I will put a bridge here where the big circle called formless now had a blue line connected to it, to the small bubble called experience. That blue line is the mystical bridge called thought. Okay. It's the same with reality. It's the same with circumstances. It's the same with the question mark, wherever it might be. Relationships, training, events, and feeling. Okay. So feeling, experience, reality, circumstance, relationship, training, event are just what I call examples of form. The list I put on the board is certainly not exhaustive. There are probably hundreds more. It depends on what word that you use. But I'm trying to convey an all-encompassness of form. We walk through life. We walk through life really as we walk through form. And because form is created through the principle of thought, we can say we walk through, we live in a world of thought. Another way of saying it is we live in a world of thought created form. We live in a world of thought created form. We do not live in the world of the physical, even though that's how it appears. We live in the world of a form that thought created for us. Okay, so once you start saying that, your understanding of the form is not going to be determined by the form. It's not going to be determined by how you're feeling. It's not going to be determined by what your experience is. It's not going to be determined by your relationship. It's not going to be determined by the training that you're qualified in. It's going to be determined by understanding how those forms were created by. Where did they come from? If you can see that your feeling is coming via the principle of thought, you'll be connected to what's within the formless. If you see that your relationship is happening through thought, and thought is the bridge to the formless, you'll be able to understand your relationship because the formless is included. It brings in a different, deeper order of intelligence that these forms alone cannot give you. And that's why when I talk about the principles, I try not to go into any of those forms. Recently, a new video from Citibank on the Citibank YouTube channel, he says some words that is very interesting. He said, I'm not interested in your problems. Problem is a form. If you go, if you, because I see the formula as wisdom, right? I know that what I need to know comes from there. I don't know what it's going to be until it's showed up. I know that's where it's going to be. Right? What that does for me is that it stops me from going into any of those forms as if those forms have the answer I'm looking for. Or as if I go into these forms, I will find the peace I'm looking for. Or I will find the quiet I'm looking for. I will find the mental health that I'm looking for. I will not find it in those forms. That was a surprise to me when I first encountered that. And while I'm talking about this, I'm going to add another circle because I think it's important.
So Brett is adding circle number 9. This is an important circle. It's one of the small bubbles that surrounds the big bubble. Again, the big bubble says formless, and it's surrounded by 9 smaller bubbles, each connected to the larger bubble by a small blue line representing thought, or the bridge to the formless. And this 9th bubble, this 9th form, is labeled mental health.
With mental health, a lot of people, professionals especially, they go into mental health, not realizing the assistance of a formula that helps them to be mentally healthy. Mental health won't make you mentally healthy. The formulas will. It's a different order altogether, completely different. Okay. But one of these stories that I'm very impacted by is, well, I should have to say this. A few months ago, I was blessed to receive an unpublished manuscript written by Citibank called Beyond Time, Space and Matter. And let's just say it's an autobiography, but it's not a book like any other, and I hope it will be published at some point. But one of the things that I'm taken by is how many people that British Citibank, even from thousands of miles away, especially the professionals like psychologists, psychiatrists, counsellors, all kinds of things, right? And they spend all this money to make the arrangement to go and see him, find a plane, or that kind of thing. And then they get to see Citibank, right? And then Citibank talks about the principle in a very spiritual way. I can't even explain how it can be so spiritual, but spiritual like way out there. Right? But the thing is that I was mesmerized by how all those professionals couldn't hear what Citibank was saying. Okay? Every time Citibank says something, the professional couldn't get out of their own mind. And I have a theory. It's only a theory, not bad, but I have a theory. So I've got a bubble here called training that connects to the formula. Right? Now, when we don't have that mystical bliss called thought, right, like this, then we're in the world of training, right? And the formula becomes invisible because there's no mystical bridge to connect the two together. Okay? So when we're in the world of training, at that point, the training becomes your master. And the formula is no longer there, it's invisible. So when the training becomes your master, and because it's in form, it's going to be very difficult to listen beyond form, because you're in the form. So until you realize that the principle of thought is that bridge, right? At that point, you'll be able to hear beyond the form, beyond the word, beyond the diagram, beyond anything you've known. And that is where real listening happens. You will not find listening in any of those forms. Okay. So when I first encountered this, I was like, listening isn't what I thought it was. I kept listening for the form. I kept listening for what people were saying. I kept listening in that direction. And little did I know that I was the first person to not recognize the wisdom that I had. I wasn't listening to it because I was in form. Other people were talking about their form, therefore I would start thinking about their form. Where's my formless? It's not there. Until I understood that my own form is created by the formless through the bridge called thought to create the form. Then I was hearing something I wish I could describe, but I cannot. But it is this. Okay. So today, when I now recognize that when people genuinely know that wisdom is available, then at that point, because the formula is where the real action takes place, then all of those forms doesn't have that power anymore. It doesn't have that compelling nature to capture your own mind. It doesn't become the boss of your mind. Oh, the feeling I'm having, now I've got to do something. How do I get rid of this? It's like the feeling has taken over your mind. You're enslaved by the feeling. But what I'm really saying is, if the formless is not present, not as something to see, but knowing that it exists, those forms will kind of capture you. It's not until you recognize the existence of the principles that suddenly the power of all those forms will be rendered moot, and therefore the formless then takes the the formless then takes over your mind. There's space, there's freedom, there's love, there's understanding, there's intelligence, all included. When you don't have that mystical bridge called thought, what happens is that form starts to take a life of its own. And like Coop said the other day, you start growing baby rabbits, and there's the whole population of them. So what does that basically mean? For example, you have a reality in the small bubble. We've disconnected the, actually you can't disconnect it, but we can believe we can disconnect it. We have a reality. What happens then? This is going to create another thought based on that reality. This thought will not be based on the intelligence. This thought will be based on the limitation of what the form has given you. You can only use that. It's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack. Right? And in order to find the needle, you have to take each piece of haystack. What do you call those, these pieces? What do you call them? Haystack or pieces of hay or whatever, I don't know. But you know what I'm talking about. Okay, but you take each one of them. Each one of them represents a thought. And goodness knows how many got to keep taking out of the haystack before we find a needle. But there's a deeper problem. Nobody asks when they're looking in the haystack, is there a needle in the haystack? Is there a needle in the haystack? If you know the formula is this, and it's there because of the principle, then it's like, here's the needle and no haystack. That's simple. Nothing to search for, nothing to dive into, nothing to dig into, nothing to analyze, nothing to figure out. Here's the needle, right here. Do you want the needle? That's it. But if you disconnect the formless from the form, because thought has nothing to do with it, you're going to be going into the haystack and praying to God to find that needle. But now I know I will never find a needle in the haystack. All it is the fruitless, endless search for something that won't be there. I'm just wasting my time doing it, wasting my time, energy, and effort, willpower, technique, tapping, you name it. So because the formula is the beginning, there's no cause. Insight has no cause. So a technique is the cause, attempting to trigger insight. But the real insight that we're looking for are those with no cause. There is no beginning. Because all the form is the result of the formless, not the other way around. I think I've said enough for now. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you or anything like that. Oh, just one more thing, we've got to do this. I'm going to remove one of those small bubbles just to illustrate what I'm doing here. Okay. Here's the form. I made it bigger because I need to put more information in it. That's all. It's not the size of a bubble that matters. That's completely irrelevant. But in this bubble is the form. Okay. We'll be able to recognize this, I hope. You recognize this? Right. So everything I put on this board is represented in this form. So if you, as an individual, go into this form, you are disconnecting yourself from the formless. Remember, I'm giving it to you in form. If you can see that the principle of thought is included in your form, you'll get the answer. That's where the answer. And to conclude, one of my favorite quotes from Sydney, his wife Barb says to Sydney, how do you know all the answer to what the audience questions were in a presentation? And Sydney Banks said, the answer is always the same once you take away the disguise. It's always the same. I'm definitely finished, Nancy.
Well, I'm not convinced that you're finished, but if you do have a question or you do have something you want to say, I know Tsippy, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been learning this for many years, and it's not a question. It's just, I want to just say that I'm extremely emotional from this whole lesson, if you want to call it. I feel like I've never felt this way before learning the 3 principles. I can't really describe it. I just have so much appreciation for everything you've shown us up until this point. And it's not my first time hearing you, but it's my whole body just, let me see if I could put into words. These pictures are exactly how we operate, exactly like those bubbles and the bubbles upon bubbles. And I don't know, I'm in awe and I'm so grateful. I'm actually emotional. Like it makes me feel like I'm coming back to like my reality. So thank you so, so much for that.
Brett, can you just briefly explain what that last bubble that shows like a replica of the others, what that represents? I'm not sure. Is that our personal thinking? I'm not sure.
First of all, the first speaker, thank you for sharing that. That was very, very meaningful to hear. Okay, personal thinking. I'm
referring to that bubble that you made underneath formless now that has like a replica of the
okay.
rest.
Okay. I'm not so keen these days on talking about thinking. Okay, because if I talk about thinking, what happens is that we get more thinking. Pretty simple. So now, the formless, right, is always impersonal. There's nothing personal about this, okay? And yet it creates the form that we go through. We have the form. I'm not saying form is real or an illusion. That's downstream, okay? But I just want to say we have form. We walk through the road of form. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or anything like that. Kate said it beautifully the other day. He talked about splitting thought into good, bad, high, low, positive, negative. One of the splits that I don't want to talk about is real and illusion. It just means more stuff going on in our mind otherwise. Okay, we have form. Okay, so I'm not making any comment about the form. However, if we take away that brief thought, right, then the impersonal is now not included in our experience. It's not included. So what's left is the personal, right? And since we have that form, and because the form is not included, we start thinking about those forms. We go into those forms, right? So what happens is that we have this form, created by thought that doesn't look like thought, and then it creates another form, and then that creates another form, on and on and on and on and on. There could be millions of them. And all of that is generated by personal thinking, right? But I don't want to say anything about personal thinking because people start working out what thinking is to try and figure out thinking. But if you understand that the principle, not thinking, the principle are included, they're involved, what it does, it reconnects the form to the formless, right? Then the power of this form is gone, wiping away all the personal thinking you have. That's how we can get a quiet mind. That's how we can have peace. It's not going to come from how you think or what you think. It's going to come from the principle themselves. If you are interested in learning about personal thinking, I have no problems with that. But let the principle be the foundation in which to learn about personal thinking. If you learn about personal thinking without the principle, I don't think you will get it. So my advice, I know there's a thing in the 3 principles that said, don't give advice, but I don't care. No, my advice is look in the direction of principles. Look in the direction of principles. It will do something for you that your own personal mind can never ever do. That's the gift. That's the blessing. That's the gratitude. And when you hear something, thank you. One of my favorite quotes came from G.K. Chesterton. He said, it is a difficult moment for an atheist to be thankful when there is nobody to thank. He's saying something here. So I hope the question about personal thinking, I've been deliberate in not answering that question, but taking you in a different direction, taking you somewhere else where I think is going to be of more constructive value to you than me answering the question.
The other thing that I just wanted to mention, I do want to acknowledge that Keith Blevins is here, and we certainly have someone to thank, and we definitely are very thankful to Keith and for all the patience and years that he's spent sharing as best he knows how his understanding with us. And there was one particular line that I remember Valda sharing with us, that's Keith's wife, that learning the principles for her spiritualized all of life. And to me, in watching what you've demonstrated today and listening to what you've demonstrated today, it's taken us beyond what I think I remember hearing Sid admonish some of his students of go beyond the psychological, go beyond figuring out what you're thinking and that your thinking is creating your feeling, and go beyond the psychological to the spiritual. And that's just another word for the formless. It's another word for God. It's another word for an unknowable author of the universe from whence all of this comes. It's the origin of every reality that we experience. Not having that bridge to connect us back to that leaves us only with the form of life in which we find ourselves. It despiritualizes all of life. And so I wanted to share that. I was reminded of that quote from Valda.
I thought you were going to say about Catesby that you wonder how he put up with that too.
This is one of the great miracles of life.
Yeah. Do you think this is a nice place to bring this session to an end?
I think so. So we're going to, just before we sign off here, first of all, thank you very much, Brett, for putting this together here and sharing this with us. We will be back next week. Brett's going to be joining us again next week and going, well, I guess further with this. I'm not sure how you can, but he will. And so I think as much as maybe a lot of you may have some questions on your mind still, or that you want to work something out still, I tend to agree with Brett right now. So we're gonna close it today, and certainly you're welcome to email your questions to me or to Brett, and we'll try to address them in the next session. In the meantime, thank you, Brett. Thank you, all of you, for joining today, and make for yourselves a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Bless you all. Okay.